quick thank you to our sponsors for making this podcast possible. They keep this show free to listen to. Does connected parenting feel confusing? What do I do in this situation? How do I handle that issue? Let me help you make more sense of it all in my 30-day challenge. We meet for 4 weeks of group coaching, and you get access to all of the Peace in Parenting online materials, my entire Connected Parent Mastermind. Plus, we give you access to our school community. I help you get more connected and jumpstart your parenting in this 30-day challenge. So go to the show notes and sign up, and I'll see you there. Hi, I'm Michelle, a mother of 2 teens. 13 years ago, I traded in punishments and rewards for connection. Now I prioritize relationship over behaviors, utilize play as a parenting tool, and set limits with empathy instead of consequences. Each week, I share my journey and interview clients, experts, and followers. Thanks for joining me on the Peace in Parenting podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the Peace in Parenting podcast. I'm Michelle, and I am so lucky to have a guest on today who's been in our community for a long time. And so I want to welcome Erik to the show. How are you?
Hi, Michelle. I'm very glad to be here. I'm very honored, actually. So thank you so much.
I mean, I'm honored. Your story is inspirational. What you've done with your sweet daughter is inspirational. And I just want everyone to know your story because I think that a lot of us can glean a lot of good knowledge from it. So why don't you tell me, when you found me and this work, or this work in general, where were you at in your parenting, and what did it look like, and what did it feel like?
I found you on Instagram. I went back in Instagram, trying to recreate when exactly I started to like your post for the first time. And it seems like not long enough ago. I don't know what to say about that, but somewhere in the fall of or late summer of 2022, I came across you. Really, I wasn't looking. I didn't know anything like this existed. Anyway, I came across you on Instagram, and at that time, my daughter was in a deep crisis, and I was looking for any kind of lifeline I could come across to help navigate those times.
Yeah.
With her. She's just turned 19 last week. And maybe not even a week ago. And so that's the stage she's at. Yeah.
So she was 16 or 17, almost.
15. Yeah.
Oh, she was 15.
The crisis, I think, began a year or so before I discovered you. But yeah, we were in the depths of it. And anyway, that's a brief kind of background, but I can tell more of that story or what's going on.
But also tell us, like, you're a single dad.
I'm a single dad. She lives with me, and we have a home together. Her mom is, however, still very much in the picture, and there's a connection there, and that's. But I think, frankly, part of the fact that she moved in with me and at the start of the pandemic is part of the story of why or how she fell into crisis. She had been living with her mom for, I remember, 3 years, 4 years up to that point. And
what did things look like in your house and feel like in your house and with her back in 2022?
Well, by that point, she had already spiraled into patterns of, she wouldn't leave her room. The anxiety and stress and depressions for her were significant. She stopped eating, and we sunk even deeper than that into levels of self-harm. And then rock bottom was a note got written, and we were in full-blown crisis at that point.
Yeah, that was hard.
Yeah. It's hard to even think about those days. the spoiler for my story is that we're in an extremely different place now. But even just thinking back then, from the safety of what is now, it's still, very hard.
Very hard. And so when you first came to this work, what was your parenting like?
Yeah. Well, I, like everyone else, probably whoever was a parent, I was doing it the way my parents had done it. One of the early learnings I had, I'm a very different personality than my daughter. And I was first attracted to your information, Michelle, because you talked about a strong-willed daughter that had been your crucible, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I have, my girl is a defiant, tender warrior girl child. And she just came into the world from the get-go that way.
Yep.
And everything. She resisted and was defiant on everything. It's like so many parents' stories, brushing teeth and getting dressed and leaving the house and trying to come back to the house. Just every little transition that she encountered, she didn't want to do it.
Yep.
And it was exhausting, as we all know. It was debilitating, even, as we all know. My then wife and I, her mom and I just didn't know. So we were parenting from a rules-based, consequence-based style. And I even tried chapter out of my father's book, which was, well, if she won't cooperate, I'll overwhelm her with my anger, and that will get the results that I want. And well, that worked with me as a kid. I was completely intimidated by that. This little girl, willing to go toe to toe.
Good for her.
Right? Exactly. It's the kind of strength that you actually would hope for. I didn't recognize it as a hopeful thing at the time.
No, not easy.
And, somewhere along the age, or somewhere around 10 years old, 11 years old, her mom moved out of the house when she was 7.
Mm-hmm.
And we subsequently got divorced. We turned to therapy and found a child therapist for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And basically the first therapist was just someone who was willing to be some sort of friend for an hour a week. And that was the extent of it.
Yeah.
We then moved on to other therapists, and there came a point where the therapists were of the school of, you just need more consequences, more rules, more boundaries.
Yeah.
And I, at that point, so much water was under the bridge, so to speak. I kept thinking, we've done that. We've tried that. And we've had our darkest moments as a family because mom and dad were holding the line with this little warrior child.
Yeah.
And I just kept, but the problem was I didn't know what else.
Well, that's the thing, right? As so many of us, I remember you coming and saying, but the therapist says we're supposed to do the consequences.
Yeah,
I was like, well, it doesn't work.
Yeah. And I was the minority report in all those meetings with the therapist. And I became an irritant of some level.
Yeah,
I was a problem for these therapists. They just like, Erik, you're harming your girl. What are you doing? Get with this program, would you, please?
Mm-hmm.
And I just, something inside of me just kept saying, all the evidence and all the experience says something else. And so I'm looking for something else. I didn't know what. And be honest with you, roughly about that time is when I came across Piece of Parenting on Instagram. And now here, finally, there was language about, well, here's an alternative. Here's a different way you can look at this.
But you glommed onto it pretty good.
Yeah, I knew already that the first issue that I had to, as a parent, really come to terms with is my own anger. And that took many years. And it was only until about 3 or 4 years ago that unfortunately, the last episode of anger that I had 3 or 4 years ago was a doozy, and it ruptured to some degree. It didn't break, but it really put a dent in my relationship with my girl.
Yeah.
And some point later, 4 months later, 6 months later, a different kind of rupture happened between my daughter and her mom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the spiral, I think, as I think back and recreate the timeline, I think that's the sort of 1-2 punch that our daughter suffered.
It's interesting. It's the rupture of connection.
Yeah. And that's at the time was not obvious to me. I'm sitting here today talking with you. It's just plainly obvious that, and all her behavior, her defiance and her warrior willing to fight was, I think, in some way or another, as I look back on it with the tremendous benefit of hindsight, and I really think it was always about connection. That's what it was always about. And man, if I had it to do again, I would like to do it differently.
But you made lemonade out of lemons, really. I mean, at 16 years old to change your entire way you think about parenting, and you did. What things did you change, and what did you start to see with her?
Yeah. Well, this whole exercise of thinking about, well, what happened here? How did we get from deep crisis to this place we're at now, which is night and day, better, different. Like I said, first up was my anger, and fortunately, I almost lost it, the connection there, but I didn't.
Yep.
And I was able to do the self therapy and the process to get to terms. I just don't feel at risk at all any longer because I understand. The next thing that I was able to do is I changed how I was talking to her.
Mm-hmm.
Again, from my father's playbook, I was lecturing, I was correcting, I was coming at it a little bit with my mother's playbook. So a little combo game plan there. I was coming at it with some judgment, nonverbal, but judgment and disappointment. And I think this little girl just was really hurt by those dynamics. And I just thought that was parenting or good parenting. My ignorance was, such that, man. So I had to kind of wake up to that. And I changed that. And it turns out words of affirmation.
Yeah.
And not correction and judgment and disappointment.
Yeah.
Were really how she needed to take it in. Honoring, recognizing her emotional process in her and letting her play that out. So here's a little child with a little body, and then by the teenage years, bigger body, and these emotions are huge. I was completely intimidated, to be honest, because of my history with around big emotions.
Yep.
From parents. And I was really hard. I couldn't tolerate it for many years. It was just, I had to stop it. I had to squash it. I had to put it down and make it stop. I couldn't do it. I had to learn the skills. No, let her rip. Go for it. I can now sit here at the end of your bed while the storm rages.
Yes.
It's not about me.
Yes.
And it's okay. And I found that once I found that capacity in me, sure, she would rage and she would storm, and that she needed me to leave her bedroom. Leave, Dad. I need to be alone. And I had to honor that and trust that. Back when we were in crisis, that was a very scary. I'm not so sure I should leave you alone. I have no idea. I don't trust what you will or won't do when you're alone. It was so crazy making.
Yeah.
But finally, we eventually got to a place where, oh yeah, I will leave you. And I leave and I go downstairs, and she's a naturally emotionally avoidant personality. She doesn't want to necessarily talk about it. She doesn't want to deal with it. And I think that I'll save this point for later, but I think it's a really important one. But anyway, finish this thought, which is what she's now doing is she'll rage and storm. I'll leave her alone, give her the space, give her the time, and she will come back downstairs where I am. Okay, Dad. And she'll plop on the couch in front of me and she'll want to talk. And she has pretty good language at this point about what that was about, what's going on for her.
Yeah.
And she's willing to share all that. She's not a big talker. I'm a big talker. If you don't want to talk, I want to talk about why you don't want to talk.
And people who don't want to talk also don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. And so she's a very different, and I have to really honor that.
Time for a short break to acknowledge our sponsors. Because of them, you're able to enjoy this podcast without paying a dime. You know what I don't miss at all? The vicious week before my period. I always used to feel like I was walking in quicksand and craving the most unhealthy of foods. My sleep was always off and my moods were unpredictable. Now it's easier to manage PMS with Estro Control. Happy Mammoth, the company that created Hormone Harmony, is dedicated to making women's lives easier. And that means using only science-backed ingredients that have been proven to work for women. They make no compromise when it comes to quality, and it shows. And the biggest benefit, feeling like myself again. That's what women mention over and over in their reviews. And there are over 14,000 reviews of Hormone Harmony. For a limited time, you can get 15% off the entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use code PEACE at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code PEACE for 15% off today.
My book, Unpunished, is finally here. It is my journey into connected parenting, the idea of perfection and how it nearly took me down as a mom. I give you my best thinking around how to be a connected parent and the insights that I've discovered over the last 12 years of this incredible journey. I'm giving my book away for free, plus shipping and handling. So go to unpunished.com and get yours today. We're shipping domestically and we're also shipping internationally.
Thanks for supporting our sponsors. Now back to the show. One question. So what was it like also getting rid of punishments and consequences in that piece?
Well, at the time, the risk was by doing so, I was indulging this child, and therefore risking her development. And I've heard you say on a different podcast kind of recently, this notion of, well, that just produces an entitled child. And my experience, it could not be more opposite of that. And I really, therefore, in my case, in my child's case, really have learned that that's not right. Actually, the opposite is
Isn't that
true.
insane, though, that our whole society was built on this idea that we have to instill goodness in a child by giving them a punishment, a consequence, and we're not keeping them safe if we don't? I remember distinctly you being in group saying, yeah, but I'm going to, she won't be safe if I don't tell her she has to do X, Y, and Z, or if she's going to get punished, then she'll be in peril.
Right. And at the time, she was a risk to herself. I mean, this was so
hard, very
really
hard,
super hard. And the kind of leap of faith, if you will, in those days, I'm pretty positive she was manipulating me. She was lying to me. The whole game was on. There's no question. Money was missing from my wallet in those days. She was smoking, and the behavior was,
dangerous.
Was dangerous, and the risk was this is just going to get worse if I don't clamp down on this. And so that was the leap of faith of
we said, no, Erik, let go.
Yeah.
Don't punish her. Let her go out with her friends.
Yeah. And she was a risk of fleeing the house. She did once one afternoon. She ran from the house because I was trying to enforce and hold the line on something or other. I don't remember what. And so I don't know if I all on a dime stopped that, but I did get it stopped. And And I used what I now know is a sort of love language, frankly, acts of service. So at the risk of feeling like I'm a parent who's just catering to the emotions and whims of this child who has no better, more grounded understanding of what she's doing but I found that that was perceived by her as help. That was an ally's behavior to her.
Yes.
That was someone who was
On her side.
on her side and available to her.
Yes.
It wasn't all these other things.
I know. And isn't it
Yeah.
so sad that we think that we think we're indulging them, or that we're solidifying their poor behavior, or that we're telling them they can, be mean. And in fact, we're just saying, no, you're hurting. I'm here. I'm supporting you in the best way I can.
Yeah. And looking back on it, I would summarize, distill it down to it. For me, the parental transition was from a place of this kid is manipulating me and trying to control me, into a place of looking at the exact same behavior, but looking at it from she's asking for help. It's not a direct ask. She has no words that are recognizable as such. But that, in fact, was what was going on. And that's what was missing. And that's what was adding to the dysregulation. That was what the dysregulation was all about.
Yeah.
She didn't feel it. And
no.
Yeah.
And the connection wasn't there. And so then what positive things did you start to see when you started to get rid of the punishments and you started to get rid of the control and listen to the feelings? And
I would say that transition took about a year.
Mm-hmm.
So this is no magic wand, but it totally led us in the right direction. And it just gradually, the dynamic between us transitioned. And, for anybody, no matter what their age, trust takes time. And she did not trust. And she said to me last week, Dad, I used to think of you as the enemy, quote unquote. That's what she, and I'm like, and she was safe in saying that because that's clearly not how she feels any longer.
No.
And that's the transition. And that's what gives me hope for the future.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because, of course, she was treating you like the enemy.
Absolutely.
And that makes complete sense. And once you started working on the connection, then she could treat you like a dad again.
Yeah. Yeah. So changing my reaction from feeling manipulated and lied to and being controlled to I need to find a way to connect with heart in order to help her and to support her. And eventually she saw that and noted it, and then eventually she believed it and trusted it. And that's where we're at today.
Yeah. What things did you see in her behavior that started to change toward you?
More willing to spend some time with me, hanging out.
Yep.
Time. She started to eat. She's now eating and cooking for herself. And
yes,
I just as an aside, I used to cook for her all the time, and then that went by the wayside entirely. And that piece is not all the way back. There's something about the act of cooking for her that I would love to have back, but I'm hoping we're working towards that, but she's at least cooking for herself and taking care of her nutrition. And she's come back from that precipice, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Great.
She shares now on her own volition. She wants to tell me stuff. I know stuff about her private life that she would never have shared before. She comes to me, I think, it's never overtly so, but she's coming for my opinion, and she's coming for, what do you think, Dad? This is what's going on. She allows me to ask her questions about, what about this? What about that?
Mm-hmm.
And she's now suggesting, hey, Dad, let's get together on Wednesday night. I'd like to spend some time with you.
Sweet girl.
Yeah, for example. So One of the really interesting things about this journey for me is where does my parental pride come in? And I've had to change
Just
that
take it
whole
right all
equation,
down to the ground. No
write
pride.
all down and recognize, come at it from a completely different level.
Yep.
And when I do so, when I look at it from that different place, her accomplishments are actually monumental. It's a huge deal.
Huge.
She's come back from the very brink of utter catastrophe.
She has, but because of you, Erik.
Well, so yeah, I was so that's the other really really huge message I think connected parenting gives to our children is that our children are worthy of that kind of effort. Wanting to change. I want to make this better. I'm willing to let go of these previously tightly held beliefs and understandings and say, that old stuff doesn't work anymore. I'm searching for something new and I don't know what it is until I find it, and then I'm going to employ it, and then I'm going to make those changes. I think over time, my girl has seen that.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think at this age she has this kind of language for it, but that's okay. I think one day maybe she'll look back and say, well, you know what? I was important enough to Dad that he did that.
100%.
Yeah.
Because the change you made isn't a change everybody is capable or willing to make. And when she gets older, she's going to realize that, right? How hard that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And she'll get her turn at that for that kind of parent.
Poor
Yeah, that's
kids.
right. It'll come, and she'll do what she can do, and it'll be good.
Yeah. What did you see more cooperation with her, more willingness to follow your lead, more willingness to participate in the house, like that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and the first thing, a big thing, she hadn't cleaned her room in a really, really long time, and it was.
I remember this.
Yeah, it really difficult to go up in that space. Oh man, now she's taking care of it.
Yes.
Yeah,
and you don't force her to. You don't make her.
I know it's
don't.
her own thing, and yeah, I keep a neat and tidy house, so it maybe not quite to that level.
That's okay.
But oh my word, it's night and day from what used to be the case.
Amazing.
Yeah. Much more willing, much more collaborative, much more communicative. Yeah, those absolutely. The tone and nature of our relationship and our day-to-day back and forth is really. So one might say, well, that comes with age. She's 19 after all, as she's getting there, so forth.
So does addiction, and so does running away, and so does all kinds of things come with age. So
that's right. And so I think that it's all starts with this transition into connectedness.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's what's brought. And so now, she graduated from high school this past fall. And there were times during her 4 years where I didn't think this was going to happen. I really thought.
I remember distinctly you coming into a meeting and saying like, well, she's just going to flunk out and I have to she can't do X, Y, and Z if she gets this grade and that grade. And I was just like, then let her flunk. It's not worth it at this moment. She's too in peril. Let her flunk.
And that was scary and really hard. And now she found it within herself to finish up. And so she's got her sheepskin, as we used to say.
Yeah, good.
And so the question is, well, what now?
She'll find her way.
Yeah. And I've actually, and this is what I was leading up, I wanted to say, I've been actively, whenever she comes around and wants to talk about it, I say, look, sweetie, I think you have had such a difficult 4 years. Your body, your nervous system, you've been through the ringer. And I think you need some healing time. I think you need some rest time. let's not, there's no deadline. You can live here for as long as you want. And I'm going to put no expectations on you. Let's just get your feet underneath you. Let's give you some time to really. And I think that that's an approach for her that's really going to result in something beautiful.
That autonomy for a strong-willed kid is like, that's the playing ground they need to come up with their own great decision, and she'll get there.
She has no lack of internal strength. She will get there.
Yep.
And I can't wait to see what she comes up with. Really.
Oh my God, that's so exciting. Really exciting. What advice do you have to give to anyone out there that could be in your situation or a similar situation, or someone just trying this stuff out? What do you say to them?
And from my own experience, I think the crux of all this is willingness to go inside of oneself as the parent and take a look and say, there's some stuff here I'd like to change, and do it. And then I think the key also is change the story about your kid. They're not manipulating, lying and to you because they're trying to control you. They need the help. They're as you always say, Michelle, it's a dysregulation. It's not manipulation. And that's it. That change in outlook can be profound.
Yeah, it can. Well, you just took it all and ran and did an incredible job with your daughter, and watching you change was a joy. Hard in moments, but a joy.
Scary, downright terrifying.
Downright scary. Yeah. Even when I was, saying, yeah, Erik, just let go. In my heart, I was like, oh God, please let this child come round, because, you never really truly do know, right? But they all seem to come around.
Yeah. And we made that transition right in the heart of her teenage years. It was
not an easy time to do it.
No, a little extra hard time to do it.
Yeah, the worst time to do it.
But it can be done.
It can be done, and it works. And it works for kids who are 25. It works for anybody, any relationship, that we have.
Yeah, right.
Erik, thank you so much. I so appreciate you sharing this space with me and talking to me. And I love your story, and I'm so excited to see what she'll do next.
Thank you, Michelle. I'll be in touch for sure.
Okay, good. Thanks for joining us on the Peace and Parenting Podcast, everybody. We'll see you next time.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.